Hello everyone, and welcome to Dark Whispers. I know many of you listen to these stories to help you fall asleep, and before you drift off, I would love to hear from you. Please leave a comment and let me know where you're listening from around the world. And if you're enjoying the video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Story 1. There is something strange about seeing a red balloon tied to your mailbox. It seems so simple, yet out of place in a way that makes your heart skip a beat. Balloons are usually for happy events like birthdays or celebrations, but this balloon feels different. The bright red color stands out sharply against the quiet backdrop of your neighborhood, pulling your attention in an almost hypnotic way. The fact that there is no note, no explanation, no reason for the balloon being there makes everything feel even more unsettling. At first, you might think it's just a joke or some random act of mischief. Maybe a child from the neighborhood tied it there without thinking much about it. After all, balloons sometimes escape from parties and end up in strange places. But as you stand there, staring at the balloon, you can't shake the feeling that there's more to it than that. The balloon is perfectly tied, not a single knot out of place. It floats in the wind, gently bobbing up and down, as if waiting for you to notice it. But why would someone take the time to leave it there with no message, no explanation? The lack of a note is especially strange. If it were just a prank, surely there would be something written on it to make it clear that it was all in good fun. But instead, there is only the balloon, quietly swaying in the breeze. You can't help but wonder who left it there and why. The unanswered question lingers in your mind, filling you with an uncomfortable feeling that seems to grow stronger the longer you look at it. The balloon starts to feel like a puzzle, something that is meant to make you question everything around you. Despite the unease that is slowly creeping over you, you try to convince yourself that there's a simple explanation. Maybe it's just a coincidence. Maybe the balloon somehow ended up at your mailbox by accident. Perhaps it's part of a forgotten party decoration or something left behind by a delivery person. But even as you think about these possibilities, your instincts tell you that something doesn't add up. It doesn't feel like a random event. It feels too deliberate, too intentional. There is no clear reason why a single red balloon, of all things, would be tied to your mailbox. And that absence of explanation only deepens the unsettling feeling inside you. You glance around the neighborhood, hoping to find someone who can explain the balloon's sudden appearance. Maybe a neighbor is nearby, or maybe there's a party happening just down the street, and the balloon is part of a larger event. But as you look around, everything seems perfectly normal. The street is quiet. There's no one in sight. The neighborhood looks just as it always does, calm and still. Now, the balloon seems even more out of place. It stands there alone, with no explanation, no context. It doesn't fit with the peaceful, everyday rhythm of your surroundings. It feels as though it is waiting for you to react, waiting for you to do something, but you don't know what that something should be. The longer you stare at it, the more it seems to haunt you. It feels as though someone placed the balloon there with a specific purpose in mind. Perhaps it's meant to get your attention, to draw you into something you're not yet aware of. Maybe it's a warning, or even a message from someone who wants to remain anonymous. It's impossible to ignore the feeling that this balloon is no accident. It feels like it is meant for you, but the message behind it is still unclear. You approach it cautiously, your heart racing as you get closer. There's something almost ridiculous about the whole situation. A single red balloon, so innocent in appearance, yet holding so many unanswered questions. You reach out a trembling hand and untie the string holding the balloon to the mailbox. As you do, the balloon gently floats upwards, tugging slightly against your grasp. But you don't let go. You watch as it rises into the air, feeling a strange sense of finality, When the balloon is finally out of your reach, the feeling of unease doesn't go away. Instead, it lingers, as if the balloon has left behind something invisible, something you can't quite grasp. At this point, you might feel a strong urge to investigate further. You may walk around your yard or check your mailbox again, hoping to find something that might explain the balloon's appearance. But as you search the area, you find nothing unusual. There's nothing that stands out, nothing that helps you understand why the balloon was tied there in the first place. The air around you feels still and quiet, and the absence of any other clues only deepens the mystery. It's as though the balloon was the only clue, and now that it's gone, you're left with even more questions than before. You start to wonder, is someone watching you? Did they know you would find the balloon? The absence of any explanation and the solitary nature of the balloon make it feel like it was placed there for a reason, to provoke a reaction from you. You start to think that maybe this is just the beginning of something more, a game or a sequence of events, each designed to unsettle you and keep you on edge. The more you think about it, the more it feels like a puzzle, something that you can't solve, and that feeling of being caught in the unknown only adds to your growing anxiety. You might consider asking your neighbors if they notice anything strange, but the thought of sounding paranoid or of overreacting stops you. What if they think you're making a big deal out of nothing? What if they didn't see the balloon at all, and you're the only one who noticed it? The idea that you might be the only one who sees the significance of the balloon makes you feel even more isolated. You wonder if the other people in the neighborhood are going about their day, completely unaware of the strange event that just unfolded in front of your own home. As time passes, the balloon and its absence continue to haunt you. You can't shake the feeling that it wasn't just a random object. It has become a symbol of something larger, something you can't quite figure out. Even though the balloon is gone, the questions it raised remain. Who left it there? Why red? Why your mailbox? It feels like an invasion into your sense of security, a reminder that things aren't always as they seem. The silence that follows only makes the mystery feel more intense. And now, more than ever, you can't help but wonder, what does this balloon mean? Why has it appeared in your life? Story 2. It was a quiet morning, one of those calm days when the sun shines gently through the curtains, casting soft, golden beams on everything. I had just finished my shower and was wiping off the bathroom mirror when I noticed something strange. At first, I thought the steam from my shower had left patterns or smudges on the glass, but as I wiped a little more, I saw that these marks weren't random. They were dates, several of them, and they were written in a very careful, deliberate way. I stepped closer to the mirror, squinting at the numbers. They looked so familiar, yet I couldn't quite place them. The more I stared, the more unsettling it became. Each date was written in the same style, like someone had written them carefully while the mirror was still foggy from my shower. And it wasn't just one or two random dates. There were several, scattered across the glass, some old and some more recent. It was clear that someone had been doing this for a while, but I couldn't remember ever noticing it before. The thought that someone had been writing on my bathroom mirror for so long, and I hadn't seen it until now, made my stomach turn. How had I missed it? I had lived in this apartment for months, and the mirror had been there the whole time. Yet today was the first time I had noticed these mysterious marks. The idea that something so strange had been happening right under my nose made me feel a bit off balance. Who had done this, and why? I reached out and touched the mirror, tracing my finger over the dates. They weren't random. They seemed to follow some kind of pattern. Although I couldn't figure out the pattern, I could tell that each date was spaced out, almost as if they were marking time, recording something important. But what could it mean? I couldn't stop wondering if these dates meant something to me. or if there was some kind of message hidden in them. My mind raced with possibilities. Was someone trying to tell me something, or was it just a harmless, odd habit? I decided to grab my phone and take a picture of the mirror, just in case the dates disappeared, as the steam began to fade. I didn't want to forget what I had seen, even if I couldn't make sense of it right away. As I snapped the photo, a strange unease washed over me. It wasn't that I had never used the bathroom before. I had showered in this very space countless times, yet I had never noticed the dates on the mirror before. The fact that they had been hidden in plain sight made me feel a little on edge. For the rest of the day, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every time I glanced at the mirror, I wondered if there were more hidden markings that I had missed, or if the person responsible for the dates was still watching me somehow. The sense of intrusion was overwhelming. It wasn't just the fact that someone had written on my bathroom mirror. It was the fact that I had never noticed it until now. It made me question how much I truly paid attention to my surroundings and what other things might have slipped by unnoticed. As the day went on, I tried to focus on other things, but the mystery of the dates stayed with me. I had no idea who could have done this, or why. I didn't have any roommates or anyone who had access to my apartment, so the idea that someone else was living with me seemed impossible. But then again, how could I explain the dates on the mirror? Were they a prank or something more sinister? I couldn't find an answer, and that uncertainty gnawed at me. The following morning, I decided to investigate further. I woke up earlier than usual, hoping to catch a glimpse of something that might explain the strange markings. I walked into the bathroom cautiously, almost expecting to see more dates written on the mirror. To my relief, the glass was clear. No fog, no signs of recent writing. It was as if the mirror had been wiped clean, or maybe the steam had never formed in the first place. The absence of the marks left me feeling both relieved and disappointed. I wasn't sure which answer I had hoped for. I ran through a few possibilities in my mind. Could I have simply missed the dates on the mirror all this time? Could there have been a time when the condensation was just right and I didn't notice? Maybe the person responsible for writing the dates had stopped altogether. But deep down, I knew something about the situation didn't feel right. If this was just a random event, why had I never noticed it before? And why would someone write dates on my bathroom mirror in the first place? I decided to take another look at the photo I had taken the day before. I zoomed in on the image, studying the dates more closely. Each one appeared to be written in the same handwriting, and they seemed to cover a wide range of time, from weeks ago to more recent days. The dates didn't follow any particular pattern that I could identify, but there was something about them that made my heart race. Maybe it was the realization that they were not just random, but seemed to have been placed with purpose. They felt like a message, even though I couldn't figure out what that message was. As the days passed, the mystery of the dates stayed with me. I began to wonder if they were meant to be a clue, a warning, or something else entirely. I thought about asking my friends or neighbors if they had noticed anything strange, but I quickly dismissed the idea. I didn't want to seem paranoid or overreacting, especially over something as strange as dates on a bathroom mirror. But the feeling of unease wouldn't go away. I had seen something, and now I couldn't forget it. One evening, as I sat down to relax after a long day, I found myself thinking about the dates again. I tried to recall everything that had happened around those times. Were any of the dates significant to me? Had I been in any particular situation that might explain the markings? But the more I thought about it, the less sense it made. The dates didn't seem connected to anything in my life, and yet I couldn't shake the feeling that they were important. They felt like fragments of a puzzle that I didn't know how to solve. A few weeks later, I decided to wipe the bathroom mirror thoroughly. hoping to start fresh. As I scrubbed away the remnants of steam and condensation, I wondered if this would be the last time I ever thought about the mysterious dates. Maybe it was just some bizarre quirk, a random occurrence that didn't have any real meaning. But as I finished cleaning the mirror and stepped back to admire the now clean surface, a new thought crossed my mind. What if the person who had written those dates was still out there? What if they were still watching me, still leaving hidden messages for me? The possibility made my skin crawl, but I couldn't deny that it was the only explanation that fit. Story 3. I opened my freezer one afternoon, and what I found inside shocked me. There, in the cold air, was a stack of Polaroid photos of me. Each photo had a date and a time written on the label, making it clear that they had been taken at different moments in my life. I stood there frozen for a moment, staring at the stack of pictures. The cold air from the freezer rushed out at me, but I barely noticed it. I was too focused on the photos. Something about them felt wrong. These were not photos from any events I could remember. They felt strangely familiar, but I couldn't figure out why. It was like they had been taken without my knowledge. The more I looked at the dates and times on the labels, the more confused I became. None of the moments they showed me matched anything I could recall. It was as if someone had been following me, quietly capturing moments of my life without me even realizing it. I felt my heart race. Slowly, I picked up the first photo. My hands trembled as I held it. The picture showed me sitting at my kitchen table reading a book. I looked so calm, completely unaware that I was being watched. The label said the photo was taken the previous week at 2:15 a.m. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. I hadn't even been awake at that time. I was sure I had been sleeping, and no one else had been in my apartment. I picked up the second photo. It was another scene of me, this time walking into my living room. The label said it was taken at 11:42 p.m. Again, I had no memory of being photographed at that time. It was as if these moments were being captured when I wasn't paying attention, when I wasn't even aware. The more photos I looked at, the more unsettled I became. There were dozens of them, showing me doing everyday things, reading, cooking, watching TV, things I did all the time. But in every photo, I couldn't remember ever being taken. These photos were perfect. There was no sign of tampering, no hint that they had been edited in any way. The labeling was precise too. It was clear that someone had been following me, tracking my every move for days. This wasn't just a mistake. It wasn't some coincidence. Someone had been documenting my life. I felt a sense of panic rise in me. I quickly looked back inside the freezer, hoping to find some other clues, something that might explain this. The coldness in the air seemed to make the tension heavier, like the photos had been placed there for a reason, like they were part of some message that I needed to understand. I took the rest of the Polaroids and examined them carefully. The strange thing was that none of these photos seemed to have been taken from far away. They weren't the kind of photos a hidden camera or a long lens would take. These photos were up close, almost like the person who had taken them was right there with me. But how could they have been there without me knowing? My mind raced, trying to piece things together. Who could have been in my apartment without me realizing it? The thought that someone had been silently watching me, capturing these personal moments of my life, was terrifying. It meant they were close, right in my own home, watching me without my knowledge. They knew my habits, my routines, and I didn't even know they were there. That was the most frightening part. How had they gotten into my home without me noticing? I always locked the doors and windows, and no one had visited me recently. I started looking around my apartment, searching for any sign that someone had broken in, but everything seemed normal. My apartment was just as I had left it the night before. There was no evidence of anyone coming in or out. Yet these photos existed, and there was no explanation for how or why they had been taken. I thought about calling the police, but would they believe me? Who would take the time to document my life in such a detailed and disturbing way? The more I thought about it, the more paranoid I became. The photos weren't just strange, they were a warning. Someone had been in my life without my permission, and now they had a record of everything I had done. I sat down on the kitchen floor, holding the Polaroids tightly in my hands. The labels on each one were so precise, with not just the date and time, but specific notes like bathroom mirror or kitchen counter. The more I read, the more it felt like I was looking at a script, a detailed account of my every move. It was like someone had been keeping a diary of my life without me knowing. The thought made my stomach twist. I had never noticed anyone around me, never heard anything out of the ordinary. But these photos proved I wasn't as alone as I had thought. There had been someone with me, silently watching and capturing my moments. I checked my phone, hoping to find something that might explain what was happening. But there were no missed calls or messages. I went to my computer and checked my security cameras, but everything seemed fine. No one had entered the building. It felt like a cruel joke, but the more I thought about it, the more it seemed like a game I had been playing without even knowing the rules. The more photos I looked at, the more unsettled I became. Who was watching me, and why? The thought kept gnawing at me. What else had they seen? What other parts of my life had they documented? I didn't even feel safe in my own home anymore. I had always thought of my apartment as a private space, a sanctuary where I could relax and be myself. But now, with these photos in my hands, it felt like a lie. Someone had been inside my world, capturing my moments without permission, and I had no idea who they were or why they were doing this. As the days went by, the photos haunted me. I couldn't stop thinking about them. I became more cautious, checking every door and window twice to make sure everything was locked. But no matter how much I tried to control my environment, the reality was that someone knew more about me than I did, and that was the most unsettling part. I couldn't bring myself to throw the photos away. It felt like if I did, I would be erasing the only evidence that something was wrong. So I kept them hidden in a box at the back of my closet, hoping that if I didn't see them, they wouldn't have power over me. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw those images. Images of me, captured in perfect moments. Not knowing that I was being watched, it was a feeling I couldn't escape. I thought about changing the locks on my doors, maybe installing new security cameras. But deep down, I knew it wouldn't be enough. Whoever had taken these photos was already in my life. They knew where I lived, they knew my habits, and worst of all, they had already been inside my space. The idea that someone could get that close to me without me noticing, without me hearing a sound, made my skin crawl. I decided to confront the photos head on. I went through each one again, trying to find something that could give me a clue about who might be behind this. And then I found something that made my blood run cold. One of the photos wasn't of me at all. It was a picture of my front door. The label said it was taken the day before I found the Polaroids in the freezer, and the time was just a few hours before I had opened the door to find them. The thought that someone had been standing right outside, watching me, made my heart stop. Now, I had no doubt. Someone was out there, watching me. They had been for a long time. They had been in my home, taking photos of me, learning my habits, and waiting for the right moment to make their presence known. The Polaroids were not just a warning. They were a declaration. A sign that the person watching me had control over my life, and I had no idea how to stop them. Story 4. It was just another normal day at work. I was sitting at my desk, typing away on my computer, trying to finish a project on time. Everything was calm and routine, or at least, that's what I thought. Suddenly, I felt a tap on my shoulder. I turned around and saw my coworker standing there, holding an envelope. His face looked serious, and he didn't seem like his usual self. "I didn't think you'd want anyone else to see this," he said in a quiet voice, handing it to me. His tone was different from normal, too cautious for just another regular day at work. At first, I thought maybe he was just playing a joke. After all, in our office, we often did little pranks to lighten the mood. Sometimes people would hand me strange things just to get a reaction, but this time, something felt different. When I took the envelope from him, I noticed how heavy it felt. It was sealed tightly, as if the contents inside were important. I glanced at my coworker, but by then, he had already turned and walked back to his desk, not saying another word. I stared at the envelope in my hands. Something felt wrong about it. It felt like it was leading me towards something I wasn't ready to discover. My curiosity won out though, and slowly, I opened the flap and took out whatever was inside. The first thing I saw was a photo. My heart skipped a beat. It was a picture of my apartment building, but it wasn't like any photo I had ever seen before. The shot was taken from an angle I didn't recognize, and it was so clear that it seemed like it had been taken from somewhere nearby. Maybe from another building across the street, or from the alley behind mine. I could clearly see the familiar details of the building, the red brick, the windows, and even the small balcony where I always kept my plants. But what made me feel uneasy was how close the photographer had been to my apartment. My breath caught in my throat. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been watching me. It wasn't just the photo that disturbed me. It was the fact that my coworker had handed it to me so carefully, like he knew more about it than I did. He was never the kind of person to get involved in anything personal, so why was he the one to bring this to me? I looked at the photo again. Whoever took it had been close, really close. They had been watching me without me knowing. My hands were trembling as I flipped the photo over, hoping to find a note or some kind of message on the back. But there was nothing. The back of the photo was completely blank, just like the front. The silence of the moment felt so eerie, like there was something I wasn't seeing, something I was missing. I felt exposed, like my privacy had been violated in a way I couldn't explain. Why would someone take a picture of my apartment building? And why would they send it to me through my coworker? I sat there for a while, staring at the photo, trying to understand what was going on. The more I thought about it, the more I felt like it wasn't just a random picture. My coworker had given it to me with such care, as if he knew something was wrong. Was he trying to warn me? Or was he just as confused as I was? Either way, it didn't make sense. Why was this happening? And why was the picture sent to me anonymously? It made everything feel so much more unsettling. I looked around the office, but no one seemed to notice anything. Everyone was going about their work as usual, but inside, my mind was racing. What was going on? Was someone following me? Had someone been watching me for a long time, waiting for the right moment to do something? My thoughts were spinning. I started to wonder if all the little things I had noticed in the past had been signs. Had someone been standing too close to me on the subway? Had I seen a shadow pass by my window late at night? And what about the strange feeling I sometimes had when I was home alone, like someone was watching me? Were these signs of something more dangerous? Or was I just overthinking it? My heart was pounding as I shoved the photo back into the envelope. I didn't know what to do. Should I ask my coworker where he got the photo from? What if he didn't know anything and was just as confused as I was? Should I take the photo to the police? But what if it was nothing? The thought of getting the police involved felt extreme. But what if it was serious? What if someone was planning something worse? The rest of the day felt like a blur. I tried to focus on my work, but I couldn't stop thinking about the photo. Every time I looked at my computer screen or glanced around the office, the thought of that photo wouldn't leave my mind. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Something felt off, like I was missing something huge. My coworker's casual attitude when handing me the envelope only added to my confusion. Did he know something? Was he involved in this? Or was he just the messenger? By the time I left the office that day, I was exhausted. The photo in my bag felt heavier than ever. I couldn't stop glancing over my shoulder as I walked to my car, half expecting to see someone following me. But there was no one. The street was empty, with only a few people walking quickly to their destinations, unaware of the unease that was growing inside me. At home, I locked the door behind me and went straight to my bedroom. I pulled the photo out of my bag again and stared at it. There was no new information, no note, nothing else in the envelope. Just the photo of my apartment building, taken from a distance. It was clear that someone had been watching me, and they had been doing it for much longer than I had realized. I started to wonder if my home had been compromised. Had someone broken into my apartment and I didn't even know? Had my security been breached? As the night went on, the feeling of being watched only grew stronger. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustling of leaves outside made me jump. I tried to tell myself I was being paranoid, that it was all in my head. But the image of my apartment building stayed with me. It was a constant reminder that I wasn't alone in my own space. What did this person want? Why had they chosen now to make their presence known? I didn't have the answers. The uncertainty was the worst part of it all. Not knowing what to do next, or who was behind this. The only thing I knew for sure was that I was no longer in control of my own life. Someone else was watching, and I didn't know how to make them stop. Story 5. One day, I received an email with the subject line, "Look outside." At first, I thought it was just a prank, or maybe even spam, so I almost ignored it. But something about the email felt wrong, like there was an odd feeling in my stomach that told me I should take it seriously. For a moment, I hesitated, then clicked on the message. The email was very simple. There was no greeting, no explanation. Just those 3 words, "Look outside." My mind raced as I wondered who could have sent this and why. Why would anyone send me such a strange message? Curiosity got the best of me, and I slowly moved toward the window. I wasn't sure what I was expecting to see. Maybe it was just someone playing a joke on me, or perhaps I was overthinking it. But when I looked outside, I froze. Across the street, standing perfectly still in front of a house that had been abandoned for years, was a figure. They were just standing there, not moving an inch, staring directly at me. The figure was in the dark, wearing dark clothes, and their face was hidden by a hood or shadow. I couldn't see their features clearly, but I knew one thing. They were looking straight at my window. My heart skipped a beat. Who was this person? I didn't recognize them, and they didn't look like anyone from the neighborhood. The house they were standing in front of had been abandoned for years. No one ever stood there, especially not at this hour. It was too strange. I stepped back from the window, my mind racing. Was this a coincidence? Maybe it was someone out for a walk, but no one ever stood in front of that house, especially not at night. The figure didn't move, not even a little. It was like they were waiting for me to notice them. I checked the email again, hoping it was some kind of mistake, or maybe just a cruel joke. but the message was still there, staring at me. Look outside. I felt my anxiety growing. I tried to think of a reasonable explanation. Maybe it was just someone walking by who had stopped for a moment. Maybe they were waiting for someone. But everything about the situation felt wrong. It didn't feel like a simple coincidence. The figure stood completely still. They didn't seem to notice that I was watching them. It was as though they were waiting for me to do something. A wave of fear washed over me. I felt trapped, unsure whether I should confront whatever was happening or stay inside, safe from whatever might be out there. The longer I stared at the figure, the more my unease deepened. I had no idea who they were or what they wanted. The only thing I knew for sure was that they were standing there, watching me, and I had no control over the situation. I felt pulled into something, but I didn't understand what. I thought about calling the police or confronting the figure myself, but I was paralyzed. I couldn't make a decision. The stillness of the night and the quiet air made the whole situation feel surreal, like I had stepped into a place where time didn't exist. Everything was too quiet, too strange. It felt like something out of a nightmare. Yet it was happening in real life. I backed away from the window, my heart pounding. I grabbed my phone, unsure of who to call. There was no immediate threat, no clear danger, but something about the way the figure stood there, staring at me, sent chills down my spine. I quickly sent a text to a friend, asking if they had seen anything strange outside. I waited for a reply, but there was nothing. I looked back out the window again. The figure was still there, not moving at all. They hadn't shifted an inch. It was as if they were waiting for me to do something. The email suddenly felt more like a trap. Why had it come to me at that exact moment? The figure had appeared just after I read it, as if they had been waiting for the right moment to show up. Had they been following me, watching me from a distance? My house was in a quiet neighborhood, and I had never felt like I had to worry about anything like this. But now, with someone standing across the street, everything felt different. I started to wonder if someone had been watching me for a while, and the email was their way of letting me know they were right outside. Maybe they had been waiting for this moment. I considered going outside to see if the figure was still there, but the thought of confronting whatever or whoever they were filled me with dread. What if it was a trap? What if they were waiting for me to leave the safety of my house, to step outside into the unknown? The idea of stepping outside, vulnerable and alone, made my skin crawl. But still, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. It felt like I was trapped in a moment that never ended, with the world outside closing in on me. The silence was so thick, it felt like it was pressing in on me. Every little noise made me jump. Each creak of the floorboards, each rustling leaf outside felt louder, sharper. I knew I couldn't stay in this state of fear for long. I needed to do something, but I didn't know what. I decided to try calling the police, but just as I was about to dial, something happened that made my heart race. The figure across the street took a step forward. It wasn't much, just a small movement, but it was enough to make panic surge through me. I quickly hung up the phone and backed away from the window. My heart was pounding in my chest. What did they want? Why were they standing there? The figure was moving slowly towards the house, but they never took their eyes off my window. It was like they were fixated on me. I felt helpless, as if there was nothing I could do to stop what was happening. Every time I looked at them, I felt more and more trapped. It wasn't just their presence that scared me. It was the way it felt like I had no control, as if I were caught in some invisible force, unable to stop what was unfolding. I thought about the email again. Why had someone sent it to me? What was the point of making me look outside? It felt like I had been pulled into something and I didn't know how to escape. Minutes passed, but it felt like hours. The figure was still there, standing motionless, as if waiting for something. Waiting for me, perhaps. My body screamed at me to do something, anything, to make sure I wasn't just a pawn in some twisted game. But all I could do was stare back at the figure, unable to look away, as they continued to move slowly toward the house. The line between reality and nightmare was blurring, and all I could do was watch, helpless, as the figure closed the distance between us, step by step. Story 6. It all started a few nights ago. I was getting ready to fall asleep, and everything in the house was quiet. The only sound was the soft hum of the refrigerator in the background. I had just turned off the lights, and the world outside my window was wrapped in a peaceful silence. That's when I heard it. At first it was very faint, almost like a whisper. A soft buzzing sound. It sounded like a phone vibrating. I stopped for a moment, trying to figure out what it was. The sound continued, but it wasn't coming from my phone. I quickly checked my phone on the nightstand, but there were no notifications. So where was the buzzing coming from? My heart started to race. I sat up in bed, feeling a sense of panic. I checked all the other devices in the room, my tablet, my laptop, but none of them were vibrating. The buzzing didn't stop. It was still there, faint but constant. My anxiety grew. It felt like the sound was getting under my skin, and I couldn't shake it. I got out of bed and started to walk around the room. I went to the corner of the room and even looked behind the curtains, hoping to find the source of the sound. But there was nothing. No phone. No other explanation for the buzzing. It was as if the phone was there, but invisible. I couldn't understand what was happening. I laid back down, trying to calm myself down. Maybe it was just a strange trick of my mind, I thought. But as soon as I closed my eyes, the buzzing continued. It wasn't just in my mind, it was real. The sound was still there, like a vibration right beside me. But when I looked around the room, everything seemed perfectly still. I couldn't figure it out. I had to find the source of the noise. It felt like the buzzing was coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. It was maddening. I got up again, walking slowly around the room with my phone in hand, hoping that somehow the buzzing would stop if I found where it was coming from. I checked under the bed, under the furniture, in every drawer. I even opened the closet door and looked inside, thinking maybe something hidden inside was causing the sound. But again, nothing. It was like the sound was coming from the air itself, vibrating through the quiet room. I went back to the bed, trying to relax and hoping the buzzing would stop, but it didn't. It went on for hours. The noise kept me up all night, a constant hum that wouldn't let me sleep. The next night, it happened again. At first, I thought the previous night had just been some kind of fluke, but as soon as I settled into bed, I heard it once more. That unmistakable buzzing sound. This time, I was more prepared. I grabbed my phone and checked for any messages, any notifications, but there was nothing. I started to search again, trying to figure out where the sound was coming from. This time, it seemed to come from the walls. Then, it moved to the floor, then the ceiling. It was everywhere, but I couldn't pinpoint the exact source. The buzzing was so persistent. It was like I was losing my mind, chasing a sound that refused to be found. As the days passed, the buzzing continued, but it never came from the same place. One night, it seemed to come from the hallway outside my room. Another night, it was coming from the kitchen, then the living room. The sound moved around the house, always late at night, always when I was about to fall asleep. It was almost like it was following me, but I couldn't figure out why. I started checking every corner of the house, opening cabinets, checking behind furniture and listening closely for any hint of where the noise might be coming from. But every time I thought I found the source, the buzzing would shift to another part of the house. The more I searched, the more the sound seemed to escape me. I even asked a friend to come over, hoping they could hear the buzzing too. Maybe I was just imagining things. I thought maybe I was hearing something that wasn't really there. But when they arrived, they heard it too. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but they agreed that there was definitely something vibrating in the house. It wasn't just in my mind. Something was happening, but neither of us could figure out what it was. We checked all the electronics, my phone, their phone, and everything else in the house. But nothing seemed to be the cause of the buzzing. The strange thing was that the sound wasn't connected to anything specific. It didn't sound like an incoming message or a notification. It wasn't regular, like the buzz of a phone on silent. Sometimes the buzzing would happen in short bursts, and other times it would go on for minutes. The sound was so familiar, but also so mysterious. It sounded like a phone, but there was no phone to be found. It was as if the phone was there, but invisible, hiding somewhere I couldn't reach. The more I thought about it, the more it began to drive me crazy. Weeks went by, and I became more and more frustrated. I was losing sleep over this strange noise. It was affecting my daily life. Every night, I dreaded going to bed, knowing that the buzzing would start again. The sound was like a ghost in my home, an unseen presence that was always there, but always out of reach. I even started to wonder if something supernatural was at play. Could the house be haunted? But I quickly pushed that thought aside. There had to be a rational explanation. Though I couldn't find it, I didn't give up. I needed to figure this out. One night, I decided to stay awake and listen carefully. Maybe I could finally get to the bottom of it. I sat in silence, straining my ears for the familiar buzzing sound. At first, there was nothing. But just as I was about to give up, I heard it again. This time, it was different. The buzzing was louder, clearer, and seemed to be coming from the far corner of the room. My heart raced. I got up and walked slowly toward the sound. I opened the closet door and stared into the dark space, hoping to find the source of the noise. But as soon as I reached out to turn on the light, the buzzing stopped. The room fell silent. I stood there, frozen in place, unsure of what had just happened. Had I imagined it? Was the sound real, or was my mind playing tricks on me? I waited in the dark, hoping the buzzing would return, but it didn't. For the first time in weeks, I was able to sleep in peace. The buzzing had stopped, and I was left wondering if it had all been in my head. The next night, just as I was about to fall asleep, the buzzing started again. It was faint at first, but unmistakable. This time the sound seemed to come from the far side of the house, in the living room. I couldn't ignore it anymore. I had to find out where it was coming from. I got up and walked toward the living room. My heart was pounding as I got closer. The buzzing seemed to be coming from an old phone charger I had plugged in on the side table. I picked up the charger and noticed something strange. The small light on it was flickering, as if it was malfunctioning. As I inspected it further, I realized that the buzzing was coming from the charger itself. The phone hadn't been plugged in, but the charger was still vibrating slightly, making the sound I had been hearing for weeks. I had finally found the source. It had been the charger all along. Even though I had found the cause, I couldn't help but feel a mix of relief and disbelief. How had I never thought to check the charger before? It had been the most obvious explanation, but I had overlooked it. As I unplugged the charger, the buzzing stopped. For the first time in weeks, the house was silent, and I was finally able to sleep without the constant hum in the background. Story 7. A cashier at the gas station asked, "Do you always buy snacks at 3 a.m.?" I had never been to the store at night before, so her question caught me off guard. I had just finished a long shift at work and was stopping for a quick snack before heading home. The store was quiet, with only the soft hum of the refrigerator and the occasional beep of the register. I didn't see anyone else in the store, so I wondered why the cashier seemed so interested in my presence at such a strange hour. I glanced at the clock and saw that it was exactly 3 a.m. For a brief moment, I felt like I was in a dream. The world outside was dark, with only the glow of the gas station lights breaking through the night. I've always been a morning person, so I wasn't used to being out so late, especially not for something as simple as a snack. It was a decision that seemed harmless, but the cashier's question made me feel like I had stepped into a world I didn't belong in. I nervously laughed, trying to brush off the awkwardness. "I don't usually," I said. "I guess tonight's different." I hoped my answer would clear up any confusion, but the cashier didn't seem convinced. She looked at me with a strange expression, almost like she knew something I didn't. It made me feel uncomfortable, but I didn't know how to explain it. I had been coming to this gas station for years, just not a night. Why was this such a big deal? The cashier kept scanning my items in silence, and I could feel her eyes on me. It was as if she was waiting for me to say more. There was something in her tone, something that made me wonder if she had seen me here before, or if I was just imagining things. I tried to think back to my previous visits, but I couldn't remember being there this late. Maybe she just thought I was a regular customer, but why would she ask about it in such a specific way? As I stood there, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The place felt different at night, quieter, almost deserted. The fluorescent lights above flickered faintly, casting long shadows over the aisles. The busy energy of the daytime had been replaced by an eerie stillness that made every sound seem louder. This wasn't the kind of place I would usually stop by so late, but for some reason, tonight felt different. I quickly grabbed my snacks, paid, and left. But the question stayed with me. What did she mean by asking if I always bought snacks at 3 a.m.? It wasn't like I was doing anything strange, just stopping for some chips and a soda. But still, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had somehow crossed a line, like I was intruding on something I wasn't supposed to be part of. Maybe it was just the quiet of the hour that made the situation feel strange, or maybe there was more to the cashier's question than I understood. The ride home was long, and my thoughts kept going back to that question. I wondered if I had been acting out of character, or if it was just a fluke that caught the cashier's attention. The world outside seemed different now. The usual landmarks I passed by in the daylight now felt unfamiliar in the dark, as if they had been changed by the hour. The streets were nearly empty, and the few cars that passed by seemed to be going too fast, as if they were in a hurry. By the time I got home, I was exhausted, but that cashier's question still lingered in my mind. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it didn't matter. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized it had uncovered something I hadn't expected to find. I had never thought twice about stopping at a gas station before, but now I was questioning everything. Had I really never been there at night before? Or had I just never noticed the oddities of that hour? The whole experience made me think about the little things I overlook in my daily routine. I tried to tell myself it was just a random question from a bored cashier, but I couldn't ignore the feeling that something about the encounter had shifted my perspective. It wasn't just about the snacks or the time of night. It was about how I saw the world around me. In that moment, I realized how little attention I paid to the small details in life, those things that seem insignificant at the time, but could actually hold meaning. The cashier's question forced me to confront that realization, and I couldn't ignore it anymore. The next few times I visited the gas station, I found myself paying closer attention to everything. I noticed the way the shelves were arranged, how the fluorescent lights buzzed above my head, and how the air smelled in the store. It felt as if I had stepped into a new version of the place, one that was different from what I had seen during the day. I also began wondering if the cashier would remember me or ask me another strange question. It felt odd to be seen in such a way, like I had become a subject of curiosity in her world. One day, I ran into the same cashier again, and this time I was ready. I decided to make light of our previous encounter, so I said with a smile, "Do you usually see people buying snacks at 3 a.m. around here?" The cashier looked at me for a moment before laughing, a genuine laugh that seemed to ease the tension. "No," she said. "It's just that it's a bit unusual to see anyone at this time. Most people who come through at night are just getting gas or something quick." I could tell that her initial curiosity had faded, but I still felt the strange connection we had made during that first encounter. We talked briefly, and I learned that the cashier worked the night shift and often saw all kinds of people stop by at odd hours. Some came for coffee, others for gas, and a few, like me, came for snacks. For some reason, she seemed to remember me because of my late night visit. Maybe it was because I didn't fit the usual pattern of customers she saw at that time, or maybe there was something else that made me stand out. Either way, the mystery was starting to fade, and I felt a little more at ease. Over time, I began to accept the fact that sometimes things happen for no particular reason. Not every question has to have deep meaning, and not every encounter needs to be full of mystery. But the question the cashier asked me at 3 a.m. remained in my mind. It reminded me that we all see the world differently. Some people notice little details that others overlook, and sometimes those details make us feel like we're part of something bigger, even if just for a brief moment. In the end, it was just a simple interaction, but it forced me to reflect on my own habits, my routines, and the way I move through the world. A question about snacks at 3 a.m. unexpectedly turned into a deeper conversation about how we perceive the world and how we can sometimes be seen in ways we don't even realize. Story 8. It was a quiet Saturday afternoon when it happened. I had just come home from running some errands, the usual simple things I had to do. The sky outside was cloudy, and a light drizzle had started to fall. It wasn't enough rain to need an umbrella, but it was enough to make everything feel gloomy. I had put my shopping bags down in the hallway and was about to make myself a cup of tea when I heard the doorbell ring. It was a single sharp chime that echoed through the house, cutting through the silence. I froze for a moment, confused. I wasn't expecting anyone. I lived alone, and the only people who usually rang my doorbell were delivery drivers or the occasional neighbor with a package to drop off. I looked at the clock. It was already mid-afternoon, and I wasn't expecting any visitors. The ringing had been sudden, unexpected, and felt out of place. I walked to the door, my footsteps slow and uncertain, wondering who could possibly be there at my doorstep. When I opened the door, I found nothing but the cool, wet air outside. There was no one standing on the porch, no sign of anyone who had been there moments before. My heart began to race. I looked down the sidewalk, but there was no one in sight. The street was empty, and the houses around me were quiet and still. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Who could have rung the doorbell and then disappeared so quickly? My mind raced with all kinds of thoughts, none of them reassuring. Just as I was about to close the door, I noticed something on the ground just outside. It was a small, folded piece of paper. I bent down to pick it up. My breath caught in my throat. The rain had started to fall heavier, and I could feel the droplets splashing against my skin. I unfolded the note, and as I read the words, a chill ran through me. "Why didn't you open sooner?" I stood frozen for a moment, staring at the note, my heart pounding. The message was simple, but it felt like a punch to the gut. It was as if the person who had been at my door knew something I didn't. And worse, they were angry at me for not opening the door sooner. A wave of panic rose within me. My thoughts were spiraling as I tried to make sense of the situation. Who could have left this note? How did they know I was inside? The idea that someone had been watching me at my doorstep made my skin crawl. It didn't make any sense. I hadn't heard any footsteps or seen anyone leave. The only thing that was real was the note in my hand and the dread that now settled in my stomach. I quickly glanced around, checking the street once more to see if anyone was hiding or lurking nearby. But there was no one in sight. The neighborhood was eerily quiet, with only the sound of the rain and the distant hum of a car passing by. I stepped back inside and closed the door, locking it behind me. My mind raced as I tried to rationalize what had just happened, but nothing made sense. Why would someone leave such a cryptic message at my doorstep? And why did it make me feel so unsettled? I tried to convince myself that it was just some kind of prank, maybe a neighbor playing a joke, or someone who had the wrong house. But the longer I thought about it, the more wrong that explanation felt. There was something off about it, something that made my skin crawl. The note was too specific, too personal. It was like the person knew exactly what I was doing when I would be home, and chose that moment to send their strange, chilling message. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The feeling followed me around the house, gnawing at me as I moved from room to room. I kept glancing out the windows, half expecting to see someone standing in my yard or peering in through the glass. I even checked the security camera footage, but it showed nothing unusual. The area around my house was empty. No one had come or gone in the time between when I arrived and when the doorbell rang. That made things even worse. The absence of any evidence made the situation even more terrifying. How could someone ring my doorbell and leave a note without leaving a trace? That night, I locked all the doors and windows and stayed up late, trying to distract myself with a book. But my thoughts kept drifting back to the incident. I couldn't stop thinking about that note. Why didn't I open the door sooner? It felt as though the person who left the note had been waiting for me to respond, like they had been expecting me to open the door right away. But why? What did they want from me? And why did they seem so angry? The days that followed were filled with a constant sense of unease. Every time I heard a knock or a ring at the door, my heart would skip a beat. I would hesitate before answering, wondering if it was the same person returning. I started avoiding opening the door altogether, peering through the peephole instead. But there was never anyone there. It was as if the person had vanished, leaving only the echo of their presence behind. I felt paranoid, like I was being stalked by someone I didn't know and could never see. I started to question my own sanity. Was I imagining things? Was the note just some random prank that had gotten to me more than it should have? But deep down, I knew I wasn't imagining it. The feeling of being watched, the sense of dread that clung to me, it was real. I couldn't escape it. It felt like I was being drawn into something dark, something I didn't understand. And the worst part was that I didn't know who to turn to for help. How could I explain this to anyone without sounding crazy? Who would believe me? A week after the strange visit, I was sitting on the couch, scrolling through my phone, when I heard a soft knock at the door. I froze, my blood running cold. I hadn't heard the doorbell this time, just a knock. Slowly, I stood up and crept toward the door, my breath shallow. I peered through the peephole. There was no one there. My heart pounded in my chest as I hesitated, unsure of what to do next. I didn't want to open the door. I didn't want to face whatever or whoever was on the other side, but I had to know. I had to see if it was real, if the person had come back again. Slowly, I turned the handle and opened the door, my eyes scanning the porch. There was nothing, no one there. But then I looked down. Another note. This one was different from the first. The handwriting was more hurried, more desperate. It read, "You didn't open again. What will you do when it's too late?" My blood ran cold as I stared at the words. My mind raced. What did it mean? And who was doing this to me? The sense of fear was overwhelming now, suffocating. I couldn't understand what was happening, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't safe. Someone was watching me, someone who knew my every move, and I couldn't escape them. The note was a warning, and no matter how many times I closed the door, it would never be enough. They were always there, waiting for me to open it, waiting for me to make the wrong choice. And I had no idea how long it would take before it was too late. Story 9. It was a quiet evening, and I was sitting on the couch, scrolling through my phone, when a notification popped up. It was from my social media account. At first, I didn't think much of it, but then I saw the message, "New login from a new location." The notification showed the city where the login had happened, and to my shock, it was halfway across the country from where I lived. My heart skipped a beat. How could someone have accessed my account from so far away? I stared at the screen in disbelief. I immediately checked the time of the login. It had happened just moments ago. There was no mistaking it. Someone had used my account without my permission. Panic set in. I quickly opened the app to check what had been done. The first thing I noticed was that I had been logged out of my account. I tried to log back in, but my password didn't work. My hands were shaking as I reset my password, typing in the new one as fast as I could. Once I was back inside my account, I checked my recent posts. The strange thing was that the posts seemed just like the ones I would normally make. Pictures I had taken, captions that sounded like something I would say. But there was one big difference: the times of the posts. They had been published while I was at home on the couch, doing nothing but scrolling through my phone. I tried to calm myself down, telling myself that maybe someone had hacked my account but hadn't done anything too crazy. But as I scrolled through the posts, something didn't feel right. The content seemed just like my usual posts, but it was written in a way that made me question if I had actually made them. One of the posts was a picture of my cat, a photo I had taken just last week, with a caption about how lazy days are the best. It was something I would definitely say. But the timing seemed wrong. How could that post have gone up while I was in the middle of a conversation with my friend at the time? My mind raced as I tried to make sense of the situation. Could someone have been in my account, watching me in real time, waiting for the exact moment to post something that looked like it came from me? Or was there something even stranger happening? I checked the rest of the posts. They all appeared to have been made in the same way. Some were selfies I had taken a few days ago. Others were simple thoughts that seemed completely in line with my usual social media presence. But how could someone log in from another city and post them without me noticing? Had I been hacked, or was I just not paying enough attention to something in my own account? The fear began to grow as I tried to investigate further. I checked the login activity in the app's settings, hoping to find more clues. I saw a list of recent logins, but the entry that concerned me the most was the one that had occurred just a few hours earlier. Once again, the location was that faraway city, and the device used was completely unfamiliar to me. I immediately logged out of my account on all devices, hoping that would prevent any further access, but the unease remained. I didn't understand how this could happen. I hadn't given my password to anyone, and I didn't think anyone had access to my phone. Yet somehow, someone had logged into my account and posted as if they were me. I decided to check my settings for any suspicious activity, but everything seemed normal. There were no strange linked devices, and no unfamiliar apps connected to my account. I checked my messages and conversations to see if anything had been tampered with, but nothing appeared out of the ordinary. It was as though the only thing that had been affected was the post. But how could someone create posts that seemed so natural? And why were all the posts things I would normally share? I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been watching me closely, learning how I interacted with my social media. The posts were too perfect, too on point with my usual tone and style to be random acts of hacking. It was as though they knew exactly how I would react in certain situations, what I would say, how I would phrase things. I started to wonder if this person had been following my account for some time, studying my behavior, and then decided to strike when I least expected it. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but I had to know if someone was truly messing with my life. My first instinct was to lock everything down. I changed all my passwords and set up two-factor authentication for extra security. I spent the next half hour changing everything: social media passwords, email accounts, bank information, anything that could have been compromised. As I did this, I tried to remember the last time I had felt anything unusual happening with my account. Had I seen any signs that something was off before this? Had anyone been talking to me strangely in the comments or sending odd messages? I couldn't remember any specific instances, but now in hindsight, I began to wonder if there had been small signs along the way. Messages I had brushed off, odd interactions with people I thought I knew. At the time, they seemed like nothing, but now they felt like clues I had missed. The more I thought about it, the more unsettling it became. Who was this person? Why had they taken such an interest in my social media? What were they trying to accomplish? I had always been careful with my online activity. I made sure my privacy settings were strict, and only trusted people could see what I posted. I never allowed anyone to have access to my personal life in such an intimate way. So the idea that someone had been watching me from afar, carefully studying me, was terrifying. As I sat back, feeling exhausted from all the thoughts rushing through my mind, I tried to calm myself down. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe it was just a glitch. Or maybe someone had hacked my account and posted by accident. But the more I looked at the posts, the more I felt like something was deeply wrong. They felt too personal, too perfectly timed. It was as though someone had slipped into my life for a moment, watched me, then left without a trace. I knew I needed to be more vigilant. This wasn't something I could ignore. After all, if someone had been in my account and posted so convincingly, what else could they do? Could they access my private messages? Or worse, my personal information? I had no idea what their intentions were, but I was starting to feel like I was being watched, and that was a feeling I couldn't shake. The sense of violation was overwhelming. In the following days, I monitored my account closely, checking for any signs of further tampering. I kept everything locked down, double-checking security measures and staying hyper-aware of anything strange. But the feeling that someone was out there, logging into my social media without my knowledge, never really went away. And with each passing day, I found myself wondering, who was this person? How did they know me so well? And what would they do next? Story 10. Earlier in the day, I had parked my car in the same spot where I always parked it, near the corner of the street. As the sun began to set, I walked back to my car. The streets were quieter now, as evening had fallen. It seemed like a normal evening, or at least I thought it was. I made my way toward the familiar side of my car. The sound of my footsteps echoed on the sidewalk, and all I could think about was getting home to relax after a long day. But as I got closer to my car, I noticed something strange. The back window, which had been perfectly clean when I parked my car earlier, now had something written on it. At first, I thought it was just a smudge or dirt, but as I got closer, I could see that it was a word: run. The word was large, written quickly in the dirt, like someone had left it on purpose. My heart skipped a beat and a cold chill ran through me. Who would do this? And more importantly, why? I stood there for a moment, staring at the word in disbelief. Run. It seemed so simple, but so unsettling. The letters weren't even, and they almost looked rushed, like the person had been in a hurry or was trying to leave a message quickly. I ran my fingers over the letters in the dirt, and they were deep, as if someone had pressed hard against the window to make them. The more I stared at it, the more the message seemed to burn into my mind. What did it mean? Run? Why would someone write that? The world around me seemed to shrink, and the usual sounds of the neighborhood started to fade into the background. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. I glanced around, half expecting someone to be watching me, but the street was empty. There was no one around, and the houses were quiet. It was just me, and this strange, disturbing message on my car. I walked around to the other side of the car, checking to see if anything else was out of place, but nothing had been touched. The car was exactly where I had left it, parked in its usual spot. But that word, run, it felt like a warning. My stomach tightened with unease. It was a strange, primal feeling, one that told me this wasn't something I could ignore. Someone had clearly been at my car, writing that word for a reason. It wasn't just a prank. The urgency in the word made it feel like a command, something I was supposed to listen to. But what was it warning me about? And why now? There had been no signs of anything unusual in the days before this. My car had been parked in the same spot for weeks, without any issues. As I stood there, my mind started to swirl with possibilities. Was this a coincidence? Had I unknowingly angered someone, and this was their way of sending a message? Or maybe I was just being paranoid, but the feeling that someone had been watching me, or worse, that someone knew something about me, was growing stronger. Where was I supposed to run from? And if this message was truly for me, why would someone want to put me in such a state of fear? I quickly pulled out my phone to take a picture of the window for evidence, but as I did, I hesitated. What if someone was watching me right now? What if they were waiting for me to notice the message? I looked around again, scanning the empty street. There was still no one in sight. The quietness of the neighborhood made everything feel even more eerie. It was like the world had stopped moving, and it was just me and the cryptic message on my car. After a few moments, I forced myself to take the picture. I needed to document it, just in case. But the more I looked at the photo, the more unsettling it became. The dirt seemed to form the letters of the word run, in a way that felt deliberate, like someone had carefully thought about how they were writing it. My hands were shaking as I zoomed in on the image, trying to make sense of it. Why had they chosen the word run? Why not something else? The logical part of my mind told me to relax. Maybe it was just a random act of vandalism, nothing more. Maybe some kid thought it would be funny, or maybe someone had a grudge against me and thought this was a way to intimidate me. But something in my gut told me this wasn't just a harmless prank. There was something about the intensity of the message, the way it seemed to demand action, that made me feel like I was being watched, or worse, hunted. I walked around my car again, checking all the doors and windows. Everything seemed locked and secure, just as I had left it. But still, the unease lingered, like a heavy fog surrounding me. Who had been at my car, and why hadn't I noticed them? The neighborhood was quiet, But there were people around. Someone must have seen something, right? Or maybe it had been done in the middle of the night when no one was around to witness it. I debated whether I should call the police. After all, it wasn't just a case of vandalism. It felt like a threat, a warning. But what could I even tell them? Someone wrote "run" in the dirt on my back window. They would probably dismiss it as a prank or some random act. I wasn't sure how to explain the fear that had taken over me. How could I explain how my heart raced just thinking about someone knowing something I didn't? I decided to drive away. Maybe putting some distance between myself and the car would help. The quiet isolation of my house no longer felt comforting. I needed answers. I needed to understand why this was happening and what it meant for me. As I sat in my car, I started the engine and pulled away slowly, glancing in the rearview mirror to make sure nothing seemed out of place. But the image of the word "run" lingered in my mind. It was a constant reminder that something was wrong. For the rest of the night, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being followed. I felt like someone was watching my every move. The strange message had triggered something deep inside me, an instinct that told me I couldn't ignore it. I stayed inside that night, locking the doors and keeping the lights on. But even then, I felt a constant sense of discomfort. The next morning, I knew I had to go back to the car and check it again. But part of me dreaded what I might find. Would the word still be there? Would there be more to the message? As I prepared to leave, I checked every corner of the house. It felt like someone was inside, like I wasn't alone. Even though I knew there was no one there, the sense of unease hadn't left me. Something was coming, something I wasn't prepared for. And the word "run" on the back window of my car was a stark reminder that I might not be able to avoid it. Everywhere I went that day, I found myself looking over my shoulder, expecting to see someone following me. The word "run" haunted me, pulling at my thoughts. What had I missed? What was I supposed to do next? The message felt like more than just a simple warning. It felt like a premonition, something I couldn't understand but couldn't ignore. And with each passing moment, the feeling that I needed to act on it only grew stronger.